talked about the slides in Las Vegas. That's the first question. From your perspective, what were some of the hot topics and trends that discussed, or things that that were of interest to you that you heard on the floor, or maybe had confirmed while you were there?
Yeah, so I think the biggest takeaway started with the kickoff speech, and it really carried through all the keynotes. And that's that we're past this point of talking about competing on the customer experience in some sort of novel concept. We know that's what's going on. We know we have to be customer-centric. We know Amazon exists, and if we don't live up to their standard, we risk disappointing our customers. Everyone understands that. The focus now has to be on winning that competition. So what are we doing that our competitors haven't, can't, or won't to create stronger and more unbreakable bonds with our customers? That's what I see really as one of the main motifs of the event, this idea of you already know you have to compete on the customer experience. Now how do you go about winning that competition? There are a few other takeaways. I think one included the shift to an omni-moment experience. And while that term itself is something that I'm kind of personally pitching, and that's a term that I very much believe in, the topic and the core of it was very much discussed throughout the event, and that is omnichannel was a great step in getting us to focus on the connection. It was very important because, if you think about the biggest business challenges and certainly the biggest customer experience challenges, they tend to be along the lines of misalignment and disintegration. There's silos within the organization. Systems don't talk to each other. And so thinking about omnichannel, how you can kind of create unification and integration and consistency across all channels, that was a great philosophical kind of step in getting the contact center to the right spot. But now we have to think about, okay, now that these channels are connected, now that we're kind of integrating our systems better, are we maximizing the value at each of those individual moments of the customer experience journey? Is every channel functioning as a full service channel that can really resolve problems? And just as importantly, do agents within the different channels, do they have the context and are they empowered enough to actually elevate engagement? And without that, then that's really where the heart of a great experience comes from. It's great when you can press 1 to move to a different agent, or it's great when you're in Facebook Messenger and you can jump to a live phone call. But wouldn't it have been better if that Facebook Messenger experience was amazing to begin with? Or let's say you do escalate, isn't it going to be so much better if the agent, when you get there, knows who you are and knows how to solve the problem? And so really making the most of moments using data and context and training is super important. A few other ones to go through. I think that certainly, nothing new in terms of the idea of reducing effort. But what I think was really valuable about this discussion here is that we really broke from that fear that reducing effort and emphasizing quick, painless transactions is somehow the enemy of personalization. It's the enemy of that magical wow customer experience. Because in reality, it is the magic, right? If you think about how rarely do you actually get to go from point A to point B without frustration, without delay, without effort. And so if a brand can actually do that, you're going to love that. You're going to think that brand is magical, even though it maybe wasn't like the most personal conversation in the world. And so I actually think that it was really good to see the idea that you can be efficient, you can reduce effort, and you could also still kind of create that delightful connection-based customer experience. And speaking of connections, we have the role of humanity. And I think this came up on a few fronts. Mm-hmm. First, obviously, there's that constant effort to define personalization. Because on the one hand, you want to make sure that you're maintaining that kind of cordial, polite, conversational feel, but you also know that efficiency matters to the customer and to the business. Customer wants a fast resolution. The business can't afford a slow resolution. And so you need to be productive. And so I think looking at how you can make sure that you're using customer insights to improve and make the experience quicker and more resolute as opposed to just making it a friendly conversation, I think is a really important tenet of personalization. There's also the intersection of humanity and technology, and I have a feeling, based on the company that's interviewing me right now, this is going to be a big one for your team as well. And that's that idea of basically as interactions become more digital or even non-conversational with bots, how do you sort of maintain that human touch? Or should you? Do you need to maintain a human touch now that technology can handle so many problems? And then finally, just looking further at technology, I think there's that idea of humanizing technology partners. And the best exhibitors that I spoke to, and I spoke to a lot on the floor, I was doing interviews in my CCW digital area, and so I had the opportunity to talk to a few of them. And the best ones were not talking up their technology, because there were over 200 exhibitors there, and many of them have, on paper, awesome solutions. They're doing great things. What really makes you stand out is how you can kind of tailor those solutions for the individual contact centers, for the leaders who are in that room. And so that idea of putting a human face on the technology partner was a big thing as well for the vendors that were there.
There's a juxtaposition between the personal human side of customer interaction and yet the immediacy that needs to occur within the outreach efforts itself, but also in that experience in that venue at that time, even if things need to pass to somebody else, or for a whole host of reasons. So there's this push then, because of the time and expense and the immediacy, to interject chatbots into the customer experience. Any discussions from your perspective, at least on the floor or just in past conversations, what you see or some best practices in that regard?
Yeah, so I'm a big believer in the idea that technology is not about the coolness or the potential functionality. It's about the actual purpose. I've written a few chatbot reports that pretty much started with that idea. And so what that means there is that launching a chatbot program really needs to begin with journey mapping. First and foremost, you need to know what's working and also what's not working within your experience in order to identify opportunities for optimization. Let's say you see customers are spending a lot of time changing an order after it's already been shipped. Well, you may want to see if there's a way to implement a bot that can expedite that process. That's an example of you're looking at what's creating effort in the journey, and you're looking at how the bot can solve that problem. That's great. But to me, that's only the first step. And the bigger, more important step is starting to focus on customer intent, knowing what the customer really wants, because that's when you find out how to actually add value. You can start to think about ways to enhance the experience and not merely fix pain points. And it's a great way to, one of the things I often talk about is if you look at a lot of data, you're going to find that people still by and large prefer live phone calls. And it's easy to say, oh, people still love talking on the phone. But do we really believe that? Do we really believe that we hate calling our friends, we hate calling our family, we hate picking up the phone for any purpose, we love emailing at work, we hate talking on the phone at work, but suddenly we love calling customer service? It's not realistic. What really happens here is that people don't trust or are not aware of the functionality, or they don't trust the functionality of digital channels, and so they think that in order to get a resolution, they kind of have to escalate to the phone. And so basically that would be an area, if you just looked at what the customer is doing, your logic would be to optimize phone calls. But if you instead looked at what the customer's real intent was, why they were choosing to call, you could start to decide, okay, here's where we implement a bot, and also here's where the education needs to come from. Here's how we have to get customers confident and conditioned to start to use that technology. And that's where, I think the real value in this journey mapping approach comes from in terms of bots. It's not just looking at pain points you can remedy. It's also about opportunities you can take advantage of. Another area when you get to the implementation is you want to consider your internal data sources as well as the partners you want to choose. So how does the tool learn? What is its cognitive process, and what data do you have to feed it? How is it connected with your different channels? And also, how does it allow customers to engage in different channels? So by that, is there a voice component? Is it web or digital only? What is kind of the way it fits into your overall customer experience, and how does it gain data about who your customers are and what they want? I've seen plenty of chatbots that really are just restating information from a knowledge base or an FAQ page, and to me, they might be chatbots in terms of the actual application,
right,
but they're not chatbots in reality, because all they're doing is being a static self-service tool. They're not really AI. And so when you want to think about implementation, you need to think about where it's getting the data, how it's using the data, and how credible that data is. And I think one of the great things, too, with partners, what you want to look at is what kind of expertise do they have about the customer experience itself? Are they technology people who came up with a really cool tool but don't know anything about escalations or appeasing customers? And even beyond that, do they understand the industry itself? So if you're financial, if you're insurance, if you're going to have very specific compliance issues, specific terminology, things that a generic bot may not be able to handle. And so you want to look at who your technology provider is and can they account for that, or can they at least allow you as a business to feed that kind of industry specific information into the tool. And then the final process concerns the management. And so that's going to look at everything from setting the right metrics to setting the escalation protocol. So how do you get the customer into the bot, and what happens when they want to come out? How do you prepare the agent? Looking at the ROI, are you looking at abandonment rates? Are you looking at self-service utilization? Are you looking at changes in call volume, CSAT, net promoter? How you're going to measure that is very important. And then ultimately also optimizing the bot as well. So retuning it, reprogramming it, learning from it, analyzing the data, that all has to happen. And so really what I think that ultimately leads to is you need to decide who's going to own the bot within your organization. And this really applies to any AI initiatives. It is, who is responsible for it? Do you have an AI department? Do you have a chief AI officer? Do you situate it with the contact center and just give them something else on their plate? Figuring out who's going to be responsible, because this is much more than plugging and playing a solution. It really is about understanding how to consistently evolve this channel, this tool, so it can make more meaningful connections with customers and provide better assistance for agents as well.